Do wooden bows break easily? In this episode, we'll torture test a bunch of bows, all the way to failure. Hopefully we'll learn something about breakage, why it happens, and what it's like when it does. I'll also be tackling the issue of fiberglass backings on wooden bows. Can they really stop a bow from failing? How to break a bow. Episode 4. Lessons from torture testing bows. Chapter 1. Let's break some bows. We'll get started with hickory. I made this bow 8 or 9 years ago, when I was just getting started. The tiller clearly isn't very good, and yet this bow took over 57 inches of draw, and it still didn't break. It did delaminate, and it formed a hinge, but even that couldn't get the bow to come apart. The bow took a ton of set, but I couldn't break it. Now hickory can break, especially if you heat treat it too much, but this example really does show just how resilient hickory can be. Number 2. This little one is made of a maple broom handle. There are a few factors that made this bow go off like a firecracker. Number 1. The tiller was bad. It was pretty bad. Number 2. This wasn't a very well selected board. There was definitely some violation. And 3. This is from kiln-dried wood. That was the smallest factor. Just to be clear, I'm not saying you shouldn't make a bow out of kiln-dried wood. You absolutely can, and there are thousands of examples to prove it. But if you do, just make sure you select a good board, following the advice in my board bow tutorial. With this one, I didn't do that. Round 3. Here's another maple bow. This one's also sugar maple, but this time air dried. I made this bow with an axe and a knife in under an hour, so it was tillered while it was still green. Despite the bad tiller, I maxed out the tiller tree again, so I took off the scale to gain another foot of runway. That did the trick. Once again, I'm very impressed with the resilience of tension-strong whitewoods. Some common woods in this category are hickory, maple, ash, elm, hazel, hackberry, hornbeam, hop hornbeam, holly, dogwood, serviceberry, and many others. Number 4. This one's a sugar maple board bow, made from a kiln-dried board. I won't say the tiller is great, but it's much better than the previous two. More importantly, this was from a very well-selected board, with fibers that spanned all the way from tip to tip. I wanted to test a better bow this time, something closer to what you'd get if you follow my board bow tutorial. I was not able to break this bow on the tiller tree, and the bow survived over 56 inches of draw. I even tried by hand, and I just couldn't get the bow to separate. It did take a lot of set, but that's to be expected when you abuse a bow this much. Considering that abuse, I don't think the set was too bad. The takeaway with this bow is the importance of wood selection. Wood that is not violated will behave much more dependably and much more predictably. Number 5. This was the second bow I ever made, almost a decade ago. There's a lot I don't love about it, especially the handle. I liked it at the time, but now I don't really care for big modern handles. The tiller wasn't very good at all, so I thought I would back it with fiberglass cloth. The stuff was awful to work with. My thinking was it might help keep the bow together. Let's see about that. I'm surprised the fiberglass didn't break. I have seen fiberglass break straight through the backing, but in this case it didn't. I do think it made the bow a little harder to break, in terms of separating it into two pieces. But I also don't think it made the bow any better. It definitely made it heavier, and a lot harder to work on than it needed to be. The thing is, most bows begin to fail on the belly, especially whitewoods. They first form a hinge, where the belly starts to collapse, and only then does the back start to break. With good wood selection and basic bow making skills, tension safety becomes much less of a concern. The weak link for most bows is the performance of the belly side. The exception to that is when the bow lifts a splinter and starts breaking from there, or if you get a tension break, but with whitewoods that's not very common. I retired this bow many years ago, only about a week after I made it. It really didn't last long. The reason was because it formed a hinge and bad compression fractures. The backing could do nothing to stop that. The biggest impediment to performance is the belly. That's why you often hear bowyers say that the best backing is air. It weighs nothing, and so it worsens performance less than other backings. I could have used any other backing on this bow, and it still would have failed in compression. The backing can't really help you with your tiller. If you feel you need a backing, I'd suggest using rawhide or tough cloth. That way you can continue to use wood carving tools, and the backing won't interrupt the process of carving the bow. The problem with fiberglass backings is that they're incredibly stiff, much stiffer than the wood. The archery industry quickly figured out that bows with fiberglass backs should also have fiberglass bellies. Since the fiberglass is so stiff, when you back a wooden bow with it, that moves the neutral plane very close to the back. This makes the belly effectively almost as thick as the bow. The neutral plane is the part of the bow's cross-section that's neither under tension or compression. The back is under tension, the belly under compression, and the neutral plane is neutral. The stiffer the backing, the more the neutral plane moves towards the back. The problem is that a thicker belly can't bend to as tight of a radius before taking set or seeing compression fractures. That's why bowyers often say that a fiberglass backing will overwhelm the belly. Bowyers that specialize in self-bows are pretty unanimous in recommending against fiberglass backings on a wooden bow. There are a few sources online that recommend it. I suggest you do your own research to see what other bowyers think. I think the takeaway from all these failures is that good wood is hard to break, even when the tiller isn't good. Instead of relying on a backing, we can simply rely on wood selection. If the fibers on the back of the bow go from end to end, then it already is backed with itself. That's the magic of a self-bow. That's all for today. Until next time, may your arrows fly true.